Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCullum and I'm here today at Morphy's taking a look at some pretty cool Walther pistols. These look like P38s. This is actually a P38 and a Walther HP, and they're both in 7.65 Parabellum instead of 9mm. So the background on these is, of course, when Walther developed this pistol, it was not the P38. It was Walther's Army pistol, a military service style pistol that they hoped to be adopted by the German military. And so they initially called it the Army pistol, and in German that's Heerespistole, HP. They did actually sell that not only to the German military, but also to the Swedish military, which adopted the model HP as their M39 pistol in 1939. That's a story for a separate video. The German army, the Wehrmacht, bought a batch of Walther HPs for testing in late 1938, did a bunch of testing, formally adopted the pistol in April of 1939 as the P38, the pistol model 38, and put it into service and started buying guns. And so that's when Walther starts marking guns P38, having gotten German military adoption. However, they continue to also offer the Walther HP as a civilian gun. It's essentially the exact same gun, but with a different designation because it's not the military version. You can think of this sort of like the difference between AR-15 and M16. The M16, the P38, is the formal German military weapon as adopted. The AR-15 is the commercial name of the gun, which may or may not also be sold to other military forces, like the Swedish adoption of the HP, but it's also available to commercial civilian buyers. So this production of the HP lasts not that long into the war. It's basically just taking place in 1940 before production demands really take over. But Walther does have guns available to the commercial civilian market. Now, it's wartime. This is a military factory, or a factory producing almost entirely military arms. So it's not like just anyone off the street can walk in and buy a Walther model HP. But there are a bunch of people who can. Military officers can buy their own pistols. High-ranking Nazi party members could certainly come in and buy a pistol. Some of them were used as gifts for diplomatic reasons or commercial reasons. There are a variety of different circumstances in which they would have a non-military pistol that they needed to produce. And so Walther did something like a little under 20,000 commercial guns like this during the war. And of those, there is a tiny, tiny subset of about 1% that were made in 7.65 Parabellum instead of 9mm. And we've got two of the approximately 225 of those that were made. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at these, and let me show you what makes them interesting. It's really cool to have two of these because there were several different sub-variations of these commercial pistols. They changed a bit as Walther produced them. There were some different options that people had, and this way I can actually show you two different examples. But first, we should cover briefly the difference between 7.65 and 9mm Parabellum. When Georg Luger develops the Luger pistol, he initially chambers it for the 7.65 by 21mm Parabellum cartridge. It's a bottlenecked cartridge, 7.65 caliber, of course, and one of the complaints from some of the early countries that were testing this pistol is that they wanted a more powerful round. They wanted a bigger, heavier bullet. And to address that concern, Luger necked up the bottlenecked 7.65 to essentially a straight wall case, which made it 9mm. And he then was able to offer both calibers as options to people looking for the Luger pistol. And the German military ended up adopting it in 9mm. However, the two cartridges remain very similar. Because they were both cartridge options in the Luger, they have the same overall length and they have the exact same case head dimensions. Just one has been necked down and one hasn't. That means the magazines for 9mm and 7.65 Parabellum are identical. The feed lips are the same, the overall length is the same. It means it minimizes the number of things you have to change to offer the pistols in either of those two different calibers. And so actually you will find a lot of different pistol manufacturers that make a 9mm pistol, but they also offer it in 7.65 Parabellum. The advantages to 7.65 there are a few. It's lighter recoiling, it's a little softer shooting. It is potentially better feeding, maybe just because the bullet's smaller and so you have like a little bit more of a sort of effective taper to feed cartridges into chambers. But like they're not hugely different cartridges. For comparison's sake, here is a 9mm P38 barrel, and here's a 7.65 P38 barrel. So with that covered, let's take a look at our pistol markings here. You can see this is the model HP, and this has the standard roll mark that Walther used, but they left the 9mm out, and they actually hand engraved 7.65mm in there. That's because they did so few of these pistols that they apparently never actually developed a roll stamp for 7.65. It was a total of approximately 225 of these guns in total. On the other side, the slide is blank. We have a serial number here, which is 3002, which fits into the known serial number range where 7.65 guns exist. And this uses an Eagle N proof mark. This is not a military proof mark. It's actually duplicated up there. This is the commercial proof mark that was introduced in German law effective January, I believe, 16th, 1940. So the law was passed in 39. The new stamping took actual effect in January of 1940, and it is distinguished from the prior mark, which was a crown over an N as a commercial proof mark. So this, again, a little bit of a contradiction here. This one is actually marked P38, so it's sort of the later designation, but it is the earlier production pistol. You can see use of the same roll stamp here that doesn't have a caliber, and then 7.65mm was engraved manually. But this one is marked P38, and it has a serial number of just 1023 with a commercial proof mark that indicates it was proofed prior to 1940. So this would have been late 1939 production. During that just brief window of a couple months where the old proof law was still in effect, but the pistol had been formally adopted as the P38 by the military and given that designation. If you're the sort of person who is able to go to Walther and order a custom pistol in a special caliber, so uncommon that they don't even have a roll mark for it, you might have a number of purposes in mind for that pistol, and target shooting would be one of them. So Walther did actually offer a wooden target grip, set of target grips that you could get on the guns, and we have an example of that here. There is a nice thumb rest on the left side, obviously for a right-handed shooter, but kind of fancy, you know, nice checkering. They still have the slot for the lanyard loop, but fancy wooden grips. They also offered a single action only model. So this is a double action gun, as is standard for all the P38s and all the HPs, but as an additional sort of layer of custom order, you could get it single action only specifically for target shooting. And those guns also had a slightly longer tang here. The trigger will appear a little bit different, and of course the fire control parts internally are slightly different to make them only single action. Unfortunately, I don't have an example of that, but those guns would have usually come with wooden target grips like this as well. But of course, most of these were double action with the standard grip panels. Of these two different patterns, the P38 marked 7.65 gun is definitely the scarcer of the two. There was a grand total of only like 25 of this sort of gun manufactured. They made about 10 of them in 1940 at the beginning of the war, and then kind of oddly, they made about 15 of them in 1944 right at the end. Not sure exactly what was going on there, but half of these things are very end of the war. As for the HP, model HP guns in 7.65, those comprise the vast majority of production, about 200 of them, and they're all done in 1940. There's really basically no mechanical difference between these pistols, even though they're in 7.65, and the standard P38s and HPs. Obviously the caliber is different, but that affects the barrel. It doesn't affect the breech face at all because the case head of these two cartridges is identical. In general, though, these do have some features common to the very early versions of the P38 and HP, and one of those features that I can show you that exists on both of these guns is this large head to the unlocking pin. So on a more typical P38 like this, you have this small diameter pin. Both of these have large diameter ones. Hopefully, one of these days I will manage to get my hands on one of the even more remarkably rare single action versions to show to you guys. But for the time being, I thought it was really cool to have access to two of the 7.65mm Walthers at the same time and of slightly different variations. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Big thanks to Morphes for giving me the opportunity to film these here for you. Thanks for watching.